All right. Excellent. Hey, everybody. My name is Nathan Smith, and I'm the Digital Programming Coordinator here at the Central Arkansas Library System. Thanks so much for joining me for Hello World Functions and Flow Control. This is the second of these Hello World sessions, and I hope that you enjoy it. Before we dive into the material, let's go ahead and get a few preliminary things out of the way. First of all, of course, there are tons of cool things happening around the library system that you should definitely check out. We're in the middle of summer reading club, and so lots of cool programs are coming down the pike here. We've got a let's see. Well, we've got a bunch of virtual story times. We've got some other cool classes coming up. I am teaching about OBS Studio, which is a live streaming program. So if if you're interested to learn about live streaming video, that's a great thing to check out. We've got stuff going on the CAL's Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/CA library system. And just a ton of great things. So, take a look, see what strikes your fancy, and hopefully you'll get a lot of you'll be able to join us for even more stuff. There's lots of great stuff happening. The other big thing, if you are having some, or if you have questions at any point, I want to make sure and encourage you to ask those whenever they arise for you. Don't worry about, basically, the point of a technology class is to make sure that, is to teach you something useful about technology. If you're learning something useful about technology, that is great. That's exactly what we want. And that means that the class great things are happening in the class, even if I'm not covering every single point in my outline or that sort of thing. That's not as important as whether you are learning useful things about technology. If you are, then fantastic. And if you're not, then ask whatever questions you need to clarify to make sure that you can understand what's going on, because that's the whole thing. If we don't cover everything that I plan to cover today, that's not as big a deal to me as if you walk away confused and not understanding what's going on. So, so make sure, ask those questions as they occur to you. Don't worry about if it's a silly question or, those sorts of things. That's not something I'm at all concerned about. I'd much rather you ask those questions so we can make sure that you can follow along with the class. Speaking of following along, one other quick thing that I want to do is I'm going to drop in the various chat places the link to the file that we're going to start out that you'll need in order to start things off and follow along. So let me get that in there. Okay, cool. All right, so I've got that in the chat and comments in all the various places. And let me drop it in here also. Okay, great. Excellent. So, so if you're planning, I mean, you're perfectly fine to just watch. If if you are, if you're like, well, I'm going to try and just absorb a little bit of this and then try it later on, you're going to be able to rewatch this later on the CAL's YouTube channel, the Facebook channel, and on Twitch. We're streaming to Twitch. This is the first time I've done one of the technology classes on Twitch. So hi, Twitch. So that's going to be great. Basically, if you are, you'll need to head over there if you want to follow along directly. Download that little text file and open it up, and paste it into your web browser here in a sec, and I'll show you exactly how to make that happen momentarily. Let's see, here we go. Hang on just a sec. Okay, cool. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's keep going. All right. Next thing that I want to do is go ahead and the other thing that I want to say, if you have those questions, well, how do you ask them? There are a few different ways depending on how you're joining me. If you are here in Zoom with me, where I'm broadcasting from primarily, what you need to do if you're on a computer is look down at the bottom of the screen, click on the little speech bubble that says chat, and then just type your questions in the little chat box that pops up. If you are in Zoom on a mobile device, what you'll want to do is tap the middle of the screen, look in the corner for a button that says more, tap on that more button, and then tap chat in the menu that pops up. And that's going to give you the chat where you can drop some stuff in. If you are joining me on one of the live streams, if you're on Facebook, just use the comments like you normally would on any other post on Facebook, and I'll see that and be able to respond to it. If you're joining me on YouTube, look for the live chat to the right of my video. If you are on a computer, or if you're on a mobile device, look down below the video. And if you're joining me on Twitch, use the Twitch chat just like you would on any other stream. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. Let me reshare that link one more time. Oh, wait, no, it's in there. Okay, yeah. Now let me do it one more time just to be on the safe side. All right, just drop that link in there again so that you can access the example file to start following along. Okay, so here's what you do with that. I am going to go ahead and switch over to screen share the browser here. All right. All right, great. Got that there. Okay, so you should be seeing my web browser and also the my notepad with the file that we're going to be working with. So the way to make this work is head on into download that file at the link that I just sent, and then open it up in whatever program it'll open up with. If you're on a Windows computer, it'll probably be Notepad, and then you'll want to select all of this to make sure you get everything in there. To do that, you can click Edit, Select All, or you can just hold Control and press A, Control A, or on a Mac, it should be Command A to select everything. Then you'll want to copy it. So right-click on it and click Copy. Or you can use the keyboard shortcut. On a PC, that's Control-C. On a Mac, that's Command-C. So we're going to copy it. And then over here in the browser, what we're going to do is head to trinket.io/python3. So type that into the address bar up there at the top. And I'll go ahead and put that in as well so that y'all can access that quickly just by clicking. All right. And I've got to recopy that now that I pasted the link into the chat. Once you're there, if you see something over here on the left, then go ahead and get rid of that. Just select it with your mouse and hit delete or backspace. Or again, you could right click and click select all, or press Control A to select all. Delete whatever is there. And then you can right click and click paste, or you can press Control V on a Windows computer or Command V on a Mac. And that should give you exactly what I have here. And that way you don't have to type all that out, because that would be annoying. I overfilled my water bottle here. I feel like it's just a matter of time until I start spilling it on my shirt. So we'll see what happens. All right. So I'm going to give you all a couple more seconds to go ahead and finish that up if you're following along. If you're not, if you're just watching, bear with me for just a moment more, and then we'll dive in. All right, great. Okay, hopefully everybody got that squared away. If not, and you need a sec, just let me know. But we'll go ahead and do a little review here. One thing, by the way, if you're finding it difficult to read the text the way that it is, you can zoom in. On most web browsers, you can use Control plus or Command plus, I'm assuming, on a Mac to zoom in a little bit there in your web browser. So that way you can see what's going on a little bit better. Okay, so what I've got right now, I've got my this open. Just to refresh your memory on a few things, we're using the Python programming language for a few reasons. Python is really easy to use, and it's a very good beginner language to start with. You can kind of so you don't have to worry so much about little fiddly details. Makes it a lot easier to just sort of to learn the basics, which is what we're after in this series. In addition to that, we're using this Trinket web interface here that allows us to type our code in and just run it quickly. So that's really nice and helpful. And of course, you can access this anytime that you need to. Let's see. And so what we've got here is the same. We're going to start with the same program that we worked on toward the end of last week's session. So let's go ahead and run through this and just talk about what it does really quickly, and then we can build on it a bit. If you missed this earlier, there should be links in the chat and so forth to basically allow you to copy and paste this little script into your web browser. Okay, up at the top here, we've got import random. And then I've added some little comments here to refresh your memory a little bit further, particularly if you're just following along, after the fact of the live session here. So this import random, that's going to add this pre-written randomness functionality. So basically, it's going to add some extra options, some extra tricks that Python can do to add randomness into your program in various useful ways. And we use that down here, but we have to do this right at the top, import random. So that way, all that functionality is available to us throughout the whole program. Next, we have this right here on, I have line 3. I've opened up this little gap here. On line 3, we've got counter equals 1. So this is the counter that we're going to use inside our loop down here shortly to just track and see what, how things are, and see how many times the user gives us a bad answer, essentially. Down here, we have this. We've got foods equal sign. And then inside of square brackets, we have a sandwich, some vegetables, and a few chips. So just a reminder, when we see these little apostrophes here around a sandwich, in programming world, we call these single quotes. They serve essentially the same function as a regular quotation mark, like we use in American English with the two like this, but the single quotes basically, the single quotes are generally how you write it in most programming languages. And so when you have a left one, you have to have a right one. You have to open it and close it each time. And that's true with parentheses. It's true with square brackets and almost anything like that. After or outside of these single quotes, we have a comma, and these commas separate these what we call strings of text. So they're little bits of text that that go together that we want Python to treat as just text for humans, basically, and not anything that it needs to actually act on. And so we have, and so this text string is a sandwich. This one is some vegetables, and this one is a few chips. And together they make up what we call a list, which we kind of tell Python that's what we want by putting it in these square brackets. And then we've added the list to this foods variable right here. So whenever we see foods, that stands in for this list, in this case, a sandwich, some vegetables, and a few chips. Okay, so down here we have while counter is less than 4. Oops, little typo there. There's a quotation mark rather than what it should be, which is a colon. So I'm guessing that came from the notepad. Yeah. So make sure you correct that little typo. Otherwise, the program's not going to work. So instead of the quotation mark that's there, we need a colon. Okay, so what this does, while counter is less than 4, is it looks at this counter variable and it says, okay, is the value of that less than 4? The value we assigned it up at the top here is 1. So yeah, it's less than 4. And as long as the value stays below 4, then we run the rest of this code that's indented down here in a loop. So let's see. Okay, yeah. So you've got this indented code down here. Indentation is important in Python. Whenever you indent something, you say you're telling Python this is inside the thing that's above it that's not indented. So in this case, print are you hungry, and then yn equals input. This stuff's indented underneath the while right here. And so that tells Python this stuff is inside of this while loop. We're going to talk about another kind of loop a little later on today. Okay, so inside of the loop, we have print are you hungry, which puts are you hungry on the user's screen over here. on the side when the program runs. And then this yn equals input. We're setting up a variable, something that can store that can store information of some sort, a value is what we call that. So we're setting up our variable. We've got the equal sign here, and then which tells Python we're storing a value inside of the variable. And then what we're going to do, this input function tells Python, hey, let the user type something in, and when they press enter, store that thing with this variable yn. Okay, so down here we had the it says if yn dot lower our parentheses, then we have two equal signs and yes inside of our single quotes. So what this is this is our if statement that's checking the yn variable up here to see whether it matches with yes right here. So basically, did the user type in yes? So the double equal sign says compare these two and see what they're like. The dot lower here, if you'll recall, the dot lower is that's the lower function or the lower method, which basically takes whatever information is stored with this yn variable and makes it all lowercase. So even if the user typed yes in all caps, it'll be lowercase temporarily here, and we'll compare it with this all lowercase yes. And so even if they typed it in caps or if they capitalized the Y or whatever, it'll come out as the same. Then we have our print statement. We'll say here have, and then random.choice foods. That's going to pick one of these and put it in the middle and give us and add an exclamation point at the end to just punctuate our sentence. And then we hit this break. When we hit the break, what happens is, so if they answered yes, we show this on the screen. Let's go ahead and just run it. Yes. Whoops. There we go. It says here, have some vegetables. It picked that randomly this time. And then this break tells it, okay, we're done with the loop now, just and it'll skip down to the bottom. Now there's nothing else beyond the loop in our program. So at that point, it's like, oh, that's the end of the program, and it just stops. Same thing with this no. We'll say good. It's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry. And then we hit this break again, and that will stop the program if we say no. And then finally, if we type anything other than yes or no, then we get this else. So anything else will print, you didn't really answer my question. Are you hungry? We'll add 1 to the counter, and then it'll continue, which means it goes back up to the top of the loop and says, are you hungry again? And they have another chance to put in an answer. So that's how this little program that we wrote last week works. Let's go ahead and, and all this green stuff, you'll notice I have the little hash marks here. The green is comments. If you put a little hash mark or octothorpe, if you want to be fancy, in front of some text, either just by itself or after whatever the actual code is, then you can write a comment, make a little note to yourself or to whoever you might be collaborating with on this code. And that way you can remember what everything does, which is nice. After you've slept a few times, it's hard to remember. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and now that we've done our little review, let's go ahead and dig into the something new here. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Grab my notes. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to take a look at our, we're going to talk about functions. So functions are a really key thing where it's part of the name of the of this particular session of the class. And they're really, really useful tools that we have at our disposal when we write programs. What functions do is they allow us to take certain pieces of code and put them in their own little box, essentially. If you, a good example of, or kind of a good analogy would be if you think about, say, your smartphone. If you have a smartphone, then you can pull it out of your pocket, go into the phone app, dial a phone number, hit the button, and you can call someone on the phone, talk to them, and have a conversation, and then hang up. In order to do that, you don't have to know anything about cellular technology in terms of like, how do the phone and the cell towers talk to each other? How does 4G work? What kinds of electronic components are inside my device? None of that stuff really matters in day-to-day usage of your phone. Now, of course, if something goes wrong with your phone, then it may end up being a problem. Like if someone, if you get an update that breaks something on your phone, or if, your cell phone carrier ends up with some sort of technical problem. That can be a little frustrating because you're like, well, it just worked yesterday. Why can't it just work today? But that's kind of but as long as as long as everything's going well with the phone company and with the people making the software for your phone, you don't really have to worry about how it works. It just kind of works. A function is sort of the same thing for your programs. So rather than you having to write out, particularly if you have something that's repeated over and over again in your program, rather than having to write that out and each time that you use it, instead you can write it one time and then you can reuse it over and over again. And once you've written that function, you don't really have to worry about what's going on inside of it. You can just essentially, you can just give it some information, let it do its thing, and then it will spit out whatever you need. So let's go ahead and write a function here in this program, and it'll become clearer what I'm talking about. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this import random at the very top, but I'm going to come up here to line 3, and I'm going to hit enter a few times to kind of add some white space for our function to make it easier to just see what's going on. Let's see, here we go. Okay, there it is. So the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out, or well, I guess it's not necessarily the first thing to do, but a good first step is going to be to figure out what our function is going to be called. So let's just call it, let's see. Let's call it answers. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to type DEF. So that's the def keyword, short for definition. And I'm going to type that in. I'll hit space, and then we're going to call our thing, or our function answer. Okay, cool. So now what we need to do is we need to tell Python what the, basically we need to give Python some information, or we need to give the function a way to get the information that it's going to be working with. Some functions don't need any particular information in order to run, and do their thing. If it's a good example might be a function that tells you what time it is. if you wrote a function that tells you what time it is, then you could just use the function. It might, Python might access your computer's clock to figure out what time it is, but it doesn't need any input from the user or even from other parts of your program. And so you can just have the function just do its thing and you're good to go. But most functions are going to require some form of input, what we call parameters. So we're going to have, we only need one parameter for this particular function, and that's going to be yn, that variable yn. Now, if you want to get real technical about it, this is not exactly the same as what's going to be, or as what's down here, but we are going to put that information in here. So calling it yn just makes sense and makes it kind of easier for us to figure out exactly what's going on. Okay, so we've got that inside of parentheses right here. Then outside the parentheses to the right, we're going to put a colon. So we have def answer yn in parentheses and then a colon. No spaces in this part. Actually, you might be able to put a space after this parenthesis, but you definitely need the parentheses to be next to the word answer, because that's the name of the function, is answer, with the two parentheses there. Okay, so we've got a colon here, and when I hit enter, just like happened last time when we were writing our while loop and our if statements and stuff down here, when you end a line with a colon and you press enter, Trinket is going to automatically indent this, because the next few lines of code that we're going to write are going to be inside the function. And in order to tell Python that they're inside the function, we're going to need to make sure that they are it's indented. So we've got def answer yn colon excuse me. And now what we're going to do is we're going to let's go ahead and set up a new variable here. So we're going to call this variable lyn. We'll do our equal sign because we're going to give that variable a value. And then the value is going to be yn dot lower with our parentheses there afterwards. So yn dot lower, a set of parentheses with nothing in between. So what that's going to do, basically what we're going to do is we're going to, rather than saying yn dot lower down here, and having to essentially take this and convert it to lowercase here, and then do the same thing down here. Instead, we're going to do it once, and we're going to be able to reuse to reuse this function, and we're going to be able to add some additional functionality to it that we could, without having to go in and mess with this loop. The thing about it, this loop is working really well. So the less we have to mess with it in order to add additional, functionality to our code, the less we have to mess with it, the better, because we're less likely to accidentally break something. This is called, in coding world, this is called modularity. When we say modularity, little pieces of code, like functions, are little modules, little boxes unto themselves. And so rather than changing the main body of the code, when we have all these little functions that are working separately, then we can tweak just those parts and have the main body of the code work the way we want it to work. And we're less likely to break something that's something really useful in the process. Okay, so here we go. We've got our lyn equals yn dot lower. So that's going to take in our yn variable, and it's going to store the lowercase version in this in this variable called lyn. Okay, so all we need to do now is to get that information back out. So we're going to so we're going to come down here and we're going to say return lyn. Cool. Okay, so that's what we've got so far. So now we need to integrate this into the main body of our program, because we've written this function, but like I said, it's modular. It's kind of hanging out all on its own. So we need to figure out inside of this code when to call the function, when to use that inside of our program here. So we've got yn equals input here. That's where the user is writing in their answer to whether they're hungry or not. Rather than use this yn.lower here, we're going to instead call our function. So let's create a new variable. We're going to call it a in s for answer. And then I'll hit equal sign right there. And we can go check. Whoops, no, sorry. We're going to do answer yn like that. Okay, so here's what this is going to do. We store the user's original input as this variable yn. Then we come down here and we create a new variable called ants, A-N-S, and then we give it the value answer and then yn in parentheses. What this does is it feeds our user's input into the function, the answer function up here at the top. And then when we come down here, it's going to store it as lowercase, and then it says return lyn. So what happens is when we put answer yn here, whatever is in this return after the function has done all of its figuring out, whatever value is here in lyn basically replaces this. So we're taking essentially the lowercase version of the user's original input and storing it with this variable ants. Now, down here, we also have to tweak this. So rather than say yn.lower =, yes, we're going to replace that with ants there and here. Okay, cool. So if ants =, yes, elif ants =, no. So now let's test it out. Let's make sure that it's still working the way we would expect, which is any way that you write yes or no in terms of capitalization, it should work properly. So, are you hungry? Yes. Here, have some vegetables. Okay, good. No. All right. Yes. Here, have a sandwich. Okay, it's working great. So far so good. We've got our program working. Well, we really have our program working exactly the same way that it did before, but we have a slightly neater situation down here in this inside of our loop. But what I want to do, the reason I made this into a function is so that we can actually add more, we can actually make this a little bit cooler so that the so that our program is a little more robust and can interact with our users a little bit better. So let me show you a possibility for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. So we've got lyn equals yn dot lower. I'm going to hit enter and insert a line between that and the return line here. The return line is usually going to be at or at least near the end of your function, because the function basically does its work and then it gives you the result. It feeds it back out. Kind of like if you put, if you had a bread machine, you put all the ingredients for the bread in it, you punch the buttons to set the right settings, you let it go for a while, and then when it beeps, bread comes out. Similarly, with a function, you put information in that you want the function to work with, and then it does its thing, and then your result comes out. And that's what the return line is for. So what I want to do now is I want to give the user the option to, rather than say, write out the word yes or the word no, I want to give them the option to just type Y or in. So let's give this a try. All right, so we're going to go, oops, if lyn double equal sign, and then in single quotes, just Y, colon, and then we'll say return single quotes, yes, just like that. So what that's going to do, we're gonna move this in a second and kind of tweak this a little bit, but for now, what's happening? We've got our if statement here. If the user, in addition to converting this, their original input into lowercase, now we're taking the lowercase version and we're looking to see whether it matches Y. If it's just a Y, whether it originally was lowercase or capitalized, then we're going to return yes. So rather than whatever's stored in the lyn, we're returning yes, and then that will replace this. So yes will be stored with this variable ants, and then that'll be compared here and here, or we'll go to the else if not. So so there's that one. Let's go ahead and give them the option to do in for no. So I'm gonna, I'll add a line here. I'm gonna backspace to unindent so that this line will be on the same, it's still indented underneath def answer, but it's only indented once, not twice like this return yes was. So we're gonna do an elif statement. So we've already checked to see whether it matches with Y. If it does, we return yes. If not, then we're going to do another comparison and see if it matches there. So we've got, so we're going elif, and we'll do lyn again, double equal sign for a comparison. And then we've got in inside of single quotes there. I'll add a colon outside the single quotes at the end there. And then we'll say return no. There we go. Okay, cool. So now we're giving them the option to type in either Y for yes or in for no. Let's go ahead and fill in this and finish off this line right here. So we need one additional thing here, which is an else statement. So I'm going to hit enter after return no, backspace once. We'll do else, colon, and then down here, return lyn. We're going to indent that so that this is what happens if you type in something else. So, excuse me. So let's run through this all together. So the user types in their input. we store that with the variable y in. Then we take that variable y in and we put it into this answer function that we just wrote up here at the top, right? So now that value ends up here. Down here, we create a new variable called lyn and store the lowercase version of the original answer with that variable lyn. Then we look at lyn and say, okay, is that equal to just y? If it is, then great. We'll return yes. So basically what that's going to do is it's going to store yes in this ans variable right here. Otherwise, we're going to come down here. Our elif statement is lyn double equal sign in. So we're looking to see if the lowercase version of our original answer is just an in. If it is, then we return no. So no gets stored in this ans variable down here. Finally, if it's not a y or an in like this, then we just return lyn. So we take the lowercase version of whatever they originally typed, and that's what gets stored in this ans variable right here. And then down here in our program, rather than comparing the original lowercase version of whatever we had here, we're looking to see whether this is yes. We're looking to see whether this, if not, we're looking to see whether it's no. And then if it's something else, you didn't really answer my question, and we start over again. Oops, we have 2 are you hungries. Let me get rid of that. Boop, there we go. Okay. All right, so back up here at the top, let me go ahead and hit the little play button. Oh, got to go all the way up. And are you hungry? Why? Here, have some vegetables. Okay, good. That worked. Whoops. Are you hungry? In. Good. It's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry. Are you hungry? Wah. You didn't really answer my question. Are you hungry? Okay, good. All right, all of that's working correctly. So great. All right. So we've added what we've been able to do, or what we're able to do now. So we added that additional functionality of counting a y or an in as if they typed yes or no. So that's great. And that should be, that's fairly, that seems to work really well. We don't have to worry about our, and now this code is kind of stable. We don't have to worry about making changes down here that could possibly break the main functionality of our program, because it won't. This is going to stay the same even as we make this function a little more complex. So let's add one more interesting piece right here. Okay, so we're checking for y and in. Let's assume that they didn't type y, they didn't type in. We've got our else statement down there, which I'm going to leave. That should stay the same basically. But what I'm going to do is come down here where it says return no, and I'm going to hit enter to create a new line. I'm going to backspace once, and we're going to do another elif here. So this next elif statement is going to allow the user to find, or is going to allow Python to find whether we typed yes or no. The way that this works is basically, so we're going to have let me show you why this is useful. So when I come up here and I hit the little play button, are you hungry? Well, check this out. I'm going to type yes, and then I'm going to accidentally hit space here and add one extra space after the word yes. When I hit enter, you didn't really answer my question, are you hungry? but I typed yes. Thing is, yes wasn't all I typed. I added that extra space at the end there. You could do the same thing over here. Add an extra space beforehand, and it doesn't count either. Or you could add some sort of additional, decoration of some sort. And again, it doesn't count. So what we want to do is actually sort this out so that Python can look for the word yes inside of our answer. And that will make it a little easier to, for us to, or that'll make it a little easier on our user if they accidentally type, an extra space or different things like that. So here's what we're going to do. First, we will all right, we're going to go. Oops, that's not where I meant to put that. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter after my return no. I'm going to backspace once. We're going to type in elif lyn. And then we're going to go dot find. And then open a set of parentheses. So shift 9 on your keyboard. And then open a set of single quotes. And finally, yes, inside of the single quotes. Then we'll go greater than sign, equal sign. So the greater than sign is the one that looks like an arrow pointing to the right. It shares a key with the period. Greater than sign, equal sign, 0, and colon. And then we're going to return yes. All right. So here's how this works. What we're going to do, so we've got our lyn. That's our variable that's storing the lowercase version of whatever they wrote. Then what we're going to do is we're going to we're adding this dot find in parentheses with yes here. What that's going to do is dot find is what's called a method. You might remember last week we used a method before, random dot choice here. Choice is what's called a method. A method is a kind of function, but what it is but it's attached to a specific object inside of our code. That's something that we'll talk about in the upcoming third session, which has now been scheduled for July 19th, Monday, July 19th at noon. And that's what's called object-oriented programming. For now, just know that this find is a function. It's just a specific type of function called a method that's acting on this lyn. And then we're putting in an argument. We're going with one of the parameters here, or we're filling in a parameter here. We've got yes in single quotes. So what we're telling Python is look to see whether lyn contains yes at some point. So if it does, once this code is run, the find method here, basically this will come up with some sort of a number value. So the first, kind of like how down here, this essentially gets replaced by the lowercase version of whatever they typed in, or by no or yes if it meets one of these up here. So what's going to happen here is the find method will return -1 if the value is not found. In other words, if there's no yes inside whatever the person typed, then this is going to be replaced by -1. If there is a yes in whatever they typed, then it's going to give you a number that represents the number of characters it had to go from the left in order to find it. Let me show you what I mean. So if the person typed, well, yes, certainly, like so, then Python is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And right here is the 6th character, or the Y in yes is the 6th character. So it's going to give us 6 in place of all of this stuff right here. So we're comparing 6 to 0. So if this comes up to be a value that's greater than or equal to 0, so in other words, Python found the string yes somewhere in whatever they typed, then we're going to return yes. So we're going to convert that into a yes inside of our function, just like we did up here in these. So that gives us the ability to look for a yes somewhere inside of our text string. Let's go ahead and make do another couple lines that will look for a no. So I'm going to go elif again down here, and again make sure you backspace so that it's only indented once. So it's inside of the function, but it's not underneath this, but it's not inside of this elif. So elif, and again we'll go lyn dot find. Open our parentheses, open our single quotes, and put no in there. Then we've got greater than or equal to 0, and we put a colon at the end. Okay, and then if it turns out this is 0 or higher, then we'll return no. Cool. Okay, so let's talk one more time about what this is doing. Well, let's test it out, and then we'll go one more time over what we're doing here, and then we'll move on to some other stuff. Okay, I'm going to hit the play button up here one more time. Are you hungry? We'll say, yes. Here, have some vegetables. Okay, good. No. Good. It's probably easier to write code when you're not hungry. Okay, that's working great. And we still have our in and our y working. But if I say, nah, you didn't really answer my question. Are you hungry? So we could add even more options here. We could add the ability for it to check for common things that mean no, but aren't directly no, or common things that mean yes, but aren't directly yes, like nah or yeah, or whatever we might want to do. So there are a lot of possibilities here. We could keep adding to this function if we wanted to. But the point that I really want to make as far as, or the thing that I kind of want to leave you with as far as this example is basically just is really just that we didn't have to change once we added this line here and we changed these to ants. We didn't have to change any of this code at all to add additional functionality. We added the functionality up here in our function itself. And because we did that, it's a lot harder for this to break. And if we wanted to use this in other places, if we wanted to add another another sequence where the user said, where we asked the user, well, how, did this program work well? Then we could use this again. In fact, let me go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come down here. I'll hit enter. Let's add some space here. So I hit enter twice underneath my continue line. And I'm going to go all the way back so that it's not indented at all. Then I'm going to say, print, open my parentheses, open my single quotes, and go, did this program work well? Question mark. Okay, I'll hit enter. So the next thing we need is we need some sort of an answer from them. We'll call this, we'll create a variable and call it feedback equals sign and then input. So now we'll ask them after the program ends, we'll ask them, did this program work well? They're going to say, we're going to give them the option to give us some input about it. And once they type it in, then we can say, then we can add a little if statement here. If answer parentheses feedback double equals, and then yes in single quotes, colon at the end of the line there. Then we'll print, open my parentheses, open my single quotes, we'll print great. Okay. Then we can say, well, we can just leave it that way. If we wanted to, we could add another, we could add an elif, we could add another else. Maybe we'll just say else print sorry to hear that. Okay, great. So, we could add a no condition if we wanted to and other stuff, but we won't worry about that right now. We've got other things to do. So let's try it out really quick. Up here at the top, again, I'm going to go hit the little play button. Are you hungry? Yes. Here, have some vegetables. Did this program work well? And let's say yes. Great. But we could also say yes and why. Great. Okay, good. So our function is working perfectly in this second scenario that we're using it in. So we've reused that whole block of code without having to rewrite it or copy and paste it. Because the more we have to rewrite and copy and paste, if I copied and pasted this code through, in my program every time I wanted to use it, one, that would be a lot more information to have to wade through when I went back and read over my code again. It would also make my program a larger file on my computer and my user's computer. And so we're taking up space we don't have to take up. And beyond that, if I were copying and pasting all these lines of code, and then I wanted to change this functionality, I would then have to go and find each time I reuse these lines of code and update that, for each and every one. Even if I'm using find and replace, that could get to be a hassle pretty quickly. And it would be a lot more error prone as well. So wherever I'm using this answer function, I can, basically I can just ignore it. In fact, I can use this little arrow button and collapse it down. So we've got a definition there for our answer function, but we don't need to worry about that. Our answer function is working great, and we can just focus on this code here. This also makes it a lot easier to work with other people when you're writing code, because if you write a function that's going to be used throughout the program, and somebody else writes a function that's going to be used throughout the program, and then a third person is writing the main body of the program, they can just call the functions that that third person can just call the functions that the other two of you are writing. And they don't even have to worry about how that other function, how that other function actually works at all. They can just feed their input or their user's input into the function and get the value returned that they need. So that's really cool. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to something a little bit different here. Okay, what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and write, let's write something new. Let's see, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and clear this out. So I'm actually going to copy it first. So I'll select all, either by right-clicking and clicking select all, or by pressing Control A on my keyboard if it's a Windows computer, Command A if it's a Mac. I'll copy it, and I'm gonna put it in Notepad for now, but there we go. Okay, cool. All right, so now I've got it selected. I can go ahead and delete it. Great. All right, so now what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a different type of thing that we can use to store information. So we've talked about our we talked about the list that we made earlier, the list of foods, right? And that's a way to store several values in a group inside of a single variable. But there's another way that we can approach something like this as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to track the scores for folks playing a game of some sort. And I'm going to start by just setting this up, putting all the data in a particular place. So I'm going to create a variable and call it scores. So I'll write the word scores equals sign. And then rather than putting a particular value over here or using input, something like that, we're going to put these numbers in. We're going to put these numbers in sort of, we're going to hard code them. We're going to write them directly into the code, at least for now. Okay, so after my equal sign, I'm going to put a curly brace right here. So left curly brace, this is the key next to P on my keyboard, and you'll have to hold shift. So it's the same key that creates the square brackets. This one is, but if you hold shift while pressing the square bracket, you get a curly brace like this. Then I'm actually just gonna press enter. And what that's gonna do is indent down here as well. The next few lines that I'm gonna write are all gonna be inside of this, stored inside of this variable scores in a type of thing that we're gonna call a dictionary. So, so what I'm gonna do on this first line inside of, actually I'm gonna use double quotes this time. Inside of my dictionary, I'm gonna do, and inside of double quotes, I'm gonna go Egan. And then outside of the quotes, I'll put a colon. And then I'm going to write 350, comma. All right. I'll hit enter after that. And we'll put Falana. Outside of our quotation marks, we've got a colon again, 578, and then a comma. Okay, quotations again, Helen, colon after the quotation mark there too, and then 220, comma. Quotation marks here, we've got Leshem, colon outside of the quotation marks, 130, comma, and finally, inside of quotation marks, Emir, colon, outside, and then 410. No comma this time. I'm going to press enter one more time, and I'm going to add a right curly brace that goes with the left one up here. And I'm actually going to backspace this just once so that it aligns with the word scores instead of being indented there. So what this is doing is this is creating what's called a dictionary. And a dictionary is a different sort of data type. So we've had strings of text. So, you know, are you hungry would be an example of that. We've had numbers as a data type. So, for example, when we set that counter variable to 1, and we've got, and then we've had a data type of, we had that list data type where we listed out the different foods. So a dictionary is another data type that you can use here. And what it does is it actually has two separate values that are connected together. So we've got our, let's see, actually, let me double check my notes because they might use different terminology. The way I'm most familiar with thinking of this and the way it's referred to in a lot of, okay, good. Yes, that's right. I am remembering correctly. Okay, so the way it's referred to in a lot of programming languages, including, as it turns out, Python, is these two values that are connected together are actually called the key and the value. So the key on this line is Egan, and the value is 350. The key here is Falana, and the value is 578. So the reason that this is helpful is that we can now go in and we can kind of we can grab information about each of these people and what score they have, essentially, by just referencing the correct part of our dictionary here. Okay, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to hit enter a couple of times, and we're going to write a function to check for our everybody's score. So first of all, of course, with our function, we need to give it a name and give it our parameters. In other words, what information do we need from other parts of the program or from the user in order to make this function work? So we'll do def. We're defining our function here. And we're going to call this function score check without the E, just to make it a little shorter. So yeah, let's just add it in that score check like that. Okay, good. All right. Then we need a set of parentheses, and inside our parentheses, we're going to say scores. I'll put a colon, hit enter, and now we've got our new indented line inside of our function. So the first thing we need our function to do is to say print, and then we'll open a set of parentheses, open a set of single quotes, and we'll say, here are the scores, colon, inside of our single quotes. And we'll go ahead and add one additional thing, which is \n. That's the \n is a new line. So that will add an extra little blank line in between the words, here are the scores, and the actual scores themselves. So it's going to print that first whenever this function is called. Then, so I'm going to hit enter, and our second line inside of the function is going to be another new, pretty cool thing. Let's do this. So what I'm going to do is type the word for, F-O-R, not for as in the number, but for as in for you. And this is going to start a different kind of loop. So last week or 2 weeks ago, we did the while loop. The while loop, the way that worked was we checked to see whether whether our condition had been met. So in this case, so we had the counter, and we checked to make sure that the value of that counter variable was less than 4. And as long as it was, then the loop kept running, except if we hit one of those break statements. So the for loop is going to be similar, but what it's going to do is it's going to go through our items inside of our dictionary here one by one until they're all done. So let me show you how that works. So first of all, we're going to go for player, comma, points in scores dot items. Open a set of parentheses, close it up, and then put a colon after that. So this is the line that starts our for loop. And what it's going to do is go through each of our players and give the score here. So we have basically what we're doing is we're setting up two variables. One are inside of, these variables are only inside of the loop. And one of those variables is going to represent the key, in this case, the name of the player whose score we're checking. That, of course, is the player variable. The points variable is going to represent the value here, the number of points that they have. So inside of this for loop, we can use these two little variables that we've set up, and we could call these whatever we want. But the first thing we put is going to be the key, and the second thing we put after the comma is going to be the value. So that's why they're in the order. If we swapped them, then wherever we use the variable points, it would actually be the person's name, and wherever we use the variable player, it would actually be the number. So there's nothing inherent about these words. It's which order they're in. So the first variable is, we put the first variable, that is going to represent the key, the person's name. And then the second variable is going to represent the value, the number of, in this case, the number of points that person has. Okay, so we've got our colon there. I'm going to hit enter, and we should have a line that's double indented here. On this other line, what we're going to do a print statement once again. So we're going to go print, open a set of parentheses, and then inside of the parentheses, no single quotes just yet. We're going to say player, and then plus to concatenate. If you recall, that was your $5 computer word a couple weeks ago. Concatenate means taking some text and putting it next to some other text. So we've got our plus sign to concatenate there. So first it's going to show the person's name. And then what are we going to put next to that? We're going to do, well, we do need a text string here. So I'm going to put some single quotes. And then right away, I'm actually going to put a backslash as an escape character. If you recall from last week, the backslash tells Python whatever character comes right after this backslash, treat it as normal text rather than something special. So I'll put backslash and another apostrophe here. So I've got apostrophe, backslash, apostrophe, apostrophe. In between these two apostrophes so that it's inside the text string, I'm going to put a space, or no, excuse me, I'm going to put an S, then a space. Score is colon space. Okay, so this is your text string right here. We've got apostrophe, backslash, apostrophe, then an S, and then a space. The word score, a space, the word is, and then a colon, and then a space. All of that's inside of your single quotes. What this is going to do is put the person's name is, and then whatever. So, so when it's writing it out for Egan, so far we've got Egan, Egan's score is colon space. And then we need to add something after that space, of course, the number of points that Egan has. So we're going to put plus sign to concatenate one more time. And then we're going to go, now this is a little tricky. These numbers, you'll notice, so our string of text here is, our strings of text here, the names of the people are red. But our numbers here, our number of points, that's blue. And that's indicating that it's a different type of data. It's not a string of text, it's an actual number. So you could have Python do some sort of math with this if you wanted. And that would be, that would be cool if we needed to figure out how many points they had total, or, what the difference in the number of points were between two people or whatever. But we don't need to do that. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to, instead, we just want it to print out the number of points. In order to do that and have it sit next to this other stuff and be printed out correctly, we need to convert the number into a string of text, at least temporarily. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a built-in function of Python called str. So str, just like that. We'll open a set of parentheses, and inside of that, we're going to say points. So it's going to take this number, 350, and it's going to convert it into a text string that says 350. That way, we can connect it with this other stuff. Okay, so we've got our function written. I need one last thing I need to do. We always, by the way, I did this at the top, but I did this on these last two, but I don't know if I said it explicitly. Usually it's best to define all of your functions at the top of your program. So that way you can use them down here. If I define the function down here, but I call the function up here at the top, then it's going to go, we don't have that function. It's your program has got to take all the functions and essentially have them ready to go before you call them. And so that's why we put the functions at the top. So, and of course, any function, if functions rely on each other, which we're not going to do anything with that today, if the functions rely on each other in order to work, then you need sort of the prerequisite functions at the top and then the ones that rely on them further down. Okay, so down here underneath our scores dictionary, I'm going to hit enter and a couple of times give us a little white space there. And I'm going to say score check. And then in parentheses, scores. So, so what we're doing, we've defined our score check function, and then we've actually input our scores. Now we can come down here and look at, and we're just calling that score check function, and we're feeding it the scores that we just defined up here in the dictionary. So I'm going to hit the little play button, and let's see if I made any typos. Oh, it worked. Here are the scores. Egan's score is 350. Falana's score is 578, and so on and so forth. That worked. Great. So one other thing that we can do here, if we want to, we have this dictionary set up. The way that we did it off the top is we went through each of these one by one and displayed all of them. But if you only wanted to display one or two, then you could also do that. Let me actually disable this line without getting rid of it. So what I'm going to do in order to do that is in code world, we call this commenting out a line of code. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to add one of those hash marks right in front of this. This is still code, but once I add the hash mark, Python sees this as a comment. Python's basically like, this is something for humans. I don't need to worry about it. And so that's a way for me to preserve old snippets of code that I might need later, or disable lines of code temporarily while I do some troubleshooting, things like that. It's really handy to be able to do this. So I'm going to comment out this line so that it's disabled. I'm going to hit enter and a couple of times, and let's go ahead and I'm going to refer to and I'm going to pick a specific person and check their score. So on this line, I'm going to go print, open a set of parentheses, and then inside the parentheses, I'm going to say scores. And then I'm going to put square brackets here. So inside the square brackets, I'm going to point to the specific key that I need to use, or the specific key for whoever I'm checking on. So I'll go. So let's see. Let's say I want to look for Egan. So I'll put Egan as a string in here. And then I'll hit the little play button. And there it is. 350 is Egan's score. I could change this name to whatever I want it to be to make this work. Another way that I could do this would be to say, let's see. I'll put person in there, and I'm going to create a person variable. So person equals sign, and then I'll do input just like that. And then I actually need one more line just to tell my user what's going on. I'll print, open a set of parentheses, open a set of single quotes, and I'll say print whose score would you like to check? Question mark. Okay, great. So let's look at these lines really quick. So first of all, I'm asking the user, whose score would you like to check? So far, so good. Then I'm giving them the opportunity to input an answer. And when they type it in and press enter, then it's going to store that in the variable person. And then down here, I've got print scores person. And what that's going to do is it's going to take this variable person, feed it into, or it's going to take this variable person and whatever's stored in there, and it's going to check it against the different keys inside my dictionary here. And when it finds somebody whose name matches, then it's going to give me their score. So let's go ahead and try that. Whose score would you like to check? Let's go Helen. I'll press enter. 220. That is indeed Helen's score. So it's looking at whatever I typed in, or it's taking whatever I typed in and checking for a key that matches it. And then when it finds the key that matches it, it returns the value that I was looking for. So Helen's score is 220. And you can even, you can even kind of do it the opposite way. So let's see. No, actually, sorry, you can't do that. I apologize. I was thinking of the wrong thing. So you can do that in order to access a ton of different information inside of your the dictionary. You can also update the information in different ways. We don't have time to do an example of that this time, but there's lots of useful stuff there. All right. That's pretty much it for today. What questions do y'all have for me before we wrap it up? All right, I don't see anything. I do see someone saying thank you in the chat. Thank you for coming on back. Because of a scheduling snafu last week I was sick, and today's class would have been at this time last week otherwise. We had to push the last session of the course, which is Hello World Object-Oriented Code, back quite a ways, unfortunately. It's now going to be on July 19th, which is a Monday afternoon at noon. Technically, I guess noon is not. So it'll be July 19th. For folks who have already registered for that, I moved the Zoom event, so you'll still get all the reminders and everything, and you don't have to re-register or anything like that. If you are interested, I haven't updated where it's listed on the website quite yet, unfortunately, but that is that should I'll be updating that this afternoon. And you can so you can head, if you haven't registered, you can head to the website, move your mouse over events, click on the website. So thank y'all so much for joining me. Oh, if you do think of questions later on, or if you're watching this after the fact on the YouTube channel, on Twitch, on Facebook, feel free to shoot me an email with your questions. The email address to use is digital@cals.org. Excuse me. And I hope that you have a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's see, where's the right window? Bye, everybody.